Ladies and gentlemen, patrons from around the world, welcome to BlizzCon 2019, the host of Hearthstone's Grandmaster Global Finals. I am your space cowboy, Master of Ceremonies, Frodan, and the only thing more consistent than my impeccable sense of fashion are the 8 Hearthstone players that we have gathered here in Anaheim, California to play for $500,000 US and the chance to call themselves the very first ever Global Final Champion. You have some familiar faces such as 2017 World Champion Tom 60229, as well as some other finalists, including HGG BlizzCon 2018 winner and Royal Never Gives Up's Leo, who will be the one to claim the throne weeks before Galakron descends upon the tavern and wreaks havoc amongst all the patrons. The answer we'll be finding out very shortly. But I'm not alone here in the tavern on the stage all by myself in this comfy attire. I also have some of my best friends over at the casting desk. We are joined by Simon Sutter Welch and David Just Ain't Shan. Boys?
Thank you so much, Frodan. I'm honored to find out that I'm one of Frodan's best friends, but my name is Soto, and I am joined by America's Grandmaster himself, Just Saying. I'm sure saying you hope to get to this stage all along. Did you ever think you'd be at this desk instead of that one on the stage?
I think we can tally this up as a win for me as well. So technically, I made it to the world stage twice now, right?
I think that's how it works. Yeah, it's just like how I've been top 8 at every world championship for like the past 4 years, right? That makes sense?
Definitely, let's add it to it.
Either way, top 8 players that we have here have a huge amount of prize money available to play for, although perhaps more importantly, the title of Global Champion is on the line. But you can see here, first place taking home $200,000 US, $500,000 total in prizing available to be played for. And that's actually a big deal because there's a couple of players in this tournament, in Surrender and Tom 60229, who could actually end this tournament as the highest prize money earners in Hearthstone history if they take down first place here. We do have the brackets for you to take a look at here. We're going to be playing out 2 groups, starting out with Group A here. You can see PNC, who qualified through Season 1 in the Americas region, Lee, who came through Season 2 from China, Surrender through Season 1 in the Asia-Pacific region, and Casey, very recently, Season 2 from Europe.
And in Group B, we have VK Lion coming from China, Tom, no stranger to the world stage, in Group B as well, representing the APAC region, Fino from Europe, hailing from Greece, and Bloodyface making a second appearance here on the world stage, back-to-back 2018-2019.
And you can see today we are going to resolve those groups as best as we can, starting off with the match that we are going to bring you very shortly, Lee versus PNC, going through all of the initial matches and then playing out the winners match and the deciders matches from those groups as well. And if you're just joining us, if you don't follow Hearthstone throughout the year, if you perhaps don't even play Hearthstone currently on a regular basis, you might be surprised to learn that there's a few old favorites that you might remember from your time playing Hearthstone that have come back into the fold. We are currently in the midst of an event called Doom in the Tomb, where 23 cards have rotated back in from the Wild format, really shaken up the meta going into this global finals. Saying, what do you think some of the biggest, most impactful cards that have rotated back in are?
So my top 3 cards from Doom in the Tomb have got to be the Evolve from Evolve Shaman, the centerpiece of that deck, Ragnaros, the Fire Lord, coming in with some game-deciding rag flips, and of course, Ragnaros off of Evolve, which is the third most important thing here, as a lot of the times the Shamans will be able to RNG out a Ragnaros. But all jokes aside, Control also got a few powerful cards, such as N'Zoth coming back and resurrecting all of those death rattles. You're going to see a lot of that in the warrior decks. And of course, Kuhn, the Forgotten King, coming back to give Drew that extra punch in the Quest list that we saw some players bring here.
Very well put. We are very nearly ready to get started, but before we do, there's one thing for people to look out for this weekend in this tournament, Sam. What do you think it is?
Yeah, sure. So to me, I think the big storyline here is the veterans versus the newcomers. We have a lot of veterans coming back to the world stage here. Tom, the first player to make it, I believe, 3 times out of the last 6 world championships. An impressive run for him. Already a world champion. Let's see if he can do it again here. And Surrender on the other side, I believe Surrender had lost to Tom in the top 8 in 2017.
Right.
So a very nice redemption arc coming out for Surrender. And of course, America's dark horse, Bloody Face, making back again for the 2nd time, showing his consistency as soon as he emerged throughout the scene in 2018.
Well, as mentioned, we do have one game coming up for you. That is PNC versus Lee. Those 2 players are champing at the bit to get started here with the global finals. Frodan is standing by to introduce them.
Thank you very much, Sato. Let's meet our players for the first match here at BlizzCon 2019. The first, the winners of America's Season 1. The first ever Latin American player to walk onto the world stage in Hearthstone Esports. Please welcome to the stage from Team Genji, PNC. Their opponents from China, the 2018 Hearthstone Global Games BlizzCon champion from Team Royal Never Give Up. Please give it up for Lee. Players, shake hands. Let's get this best of 3 started. Let's play some Hearthstone.
Thank you very much, Frodan. You see 2 fantastic players raring to go here. PNC versus Lee. I think if you've been following Hearthstone Grandmasters up until this point, you'll have some idea of who PNC is, but Lee might be a little bit of an unknown for you. He has been a part of the competitive circuit for the last couple of years. We've seen him at an HCT championship event under the prior system, and he was also the team captain of that China team that did take home Hearthstone Global Games last year. But you can see now, just down there, the bans are in. We are playing best of 3 conquest for these group stages. Shield phase is in effect. You can see saying 2 shamans have been protected. Does that surprise you in this series? Do you think that's what we're going to be seeing throughout the tournament?
I think this is a pretty standard protocol at this point. Meta's fairly soft. Shaman definitely the top dog. Definitely want to be protecting that deck. But a little bit of surprise here, PNC's Paladin actually being banned. And I know RNGLeaoh actually, throughout his runs in 2019, kind of pioneered the Shivala Paladin when Saviors of All Doom came out.
Yep.
So he definitely gives that deck a lot of respect. He definitely feels like it's a very strong deck. Choosing to ban it over the Priest, which I would have thought both players would have been on the Priest ban and the Shaman Protect.
Yeah, because I know we talked a lot yesterday about how you thought potentially Holy Wrath was, or the difference in the 2 Paladins was a big talking point in this series. But we really didn't discuss it being banned too much. I think we did expect to see those priests going down. So definitely a lot of respect being given, and I wonder how much of that does come down to just the level of respect he, as the pioneer of the deck, has for that deck in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, the OTK Paladin definitely got a bit of a boost as well. With Emperor Thorson, the deck is no joke. And early Thorson can overcome a lot of the bad matchups that it might have across the field here.
Sure. So I believe we're going to be kicking things off with a Shaman Mirror when things do get started. And Shaman Mirrors can progress at a very breakneck speed. So why don't we take a little moment now, before it even starts, to pick your brain, Saiyan, one of the very best players in the world, of course. What's important in the Shaman Mirror, like from the Mulligan stage onwards?
Sure. So the Shaman Mirror is a lot about the massive swing turns that they can have with the Mogu, the Evolves, the Hairs, and Sea Giant to boost. So when it comes down to Shaman Mirror, it's actually better to be the second one to act. In a lot of cases, you don't want to be the first one to make your power play, because your opponent will have more minions on the board, reducing the cost of their Mogu, reducing the cost of their Sea Giant, and they might hit you back with an even stronger swing turn. So this is really just a game of tiptoeing around the early turns and making sure you're the one to get the last laugh with the bigger swing turn.
And so from the Mulligan stage, which cards are you keeping? Because I know there's some debate. Everyone's keeping Evolve as far as I've seen, but I know there's some disagreement on the card Desert Hair, whether you keep that like solo in your hand without Evolve.
You know, the combination of Desert Hair and Evolve is very tempting, but in the end, I think Evolve is the card that wins out. You don't need to have the hair for Evolve to be good, but you kind of need to have the Evolve for the hair to be good. So if I'm solo keeping Desert Hair, I think a lot of the times that can be a mistake. Instead, I'd like to mulligan for the Evolve, maybe the Mogu, and maybe some early tools to make sure that you can control the board state, such as Lickum.
Okay, makes sense to me. You can take a closer look at the list now, and I think another good talking point here is that both of these players are choosing to run Stormbringer in their deck. 6 mana, evolve your entire board into legendary minions when you're playing a token-based deck as this is, floods the board with 1/1s, throws Soul of the Murloc on everything so the board can't be removed. I think that's a very, very powerful finisher. Functions as, I guess, like the 3rd or 4th Bloodlust if you want to include Vicina as well in that. It's not a card that we really saw a huge amount of until like the last few days or so, I would say. Are you a fan of Stormbringer in the Shaman?
You know, I think for ladder games, a lot of people haven't been excluding the Stormbringer,
Okay.
but for tournament play, I kind of like the decision. The meta's going to be a little bit slower. Certainly the 3rd and 4th decks are going to keep Shaman in mind, A, and then B, also play like a longer game plan. So it's nice to see Shamans reacting to that and deciding to play Stormbringer. It's fairly good against Druid and some of the other matchups.
So without further ado, we are ready to get started. Game number 1, match number 1, Hearthstone Global Finals here, South America versus China, PNC versus Lee. Right off the bat here, I do think the mulligan is incredibly important in this matchup, so what do you make of these mulligans from the players?
Well, definitely. I think Lee comes out ahead in the mulligan phase here just because he's able to keep Spirit of the Frog and having Coin. That's kind of your cycle engine throughout the deck, so he can play kind of reactively. It's not possible for the other Shaman to deal with the Spirit of the Frog, and kind of sets up for Lee to have one of the big swing turns from Shaman.
Yeah, so I know I was talking to you yesterday about situations where you could expect to see players even like skip playing their Frog on curve because they want to be the guy playing the Frog second, kind of to what you were speaking to in the intro to the match.
Yeah, Lee here, we'll see how fast he pulls the trigger on the Frog here, but I was a little surprised that he kept the Sludge Slurper.
Okay.
I think a lot of the times here, you're just looking for more of your combo pieces to give yourself that big swing turn. So I would have looked for Mutate, I would look for Evolve. I don't think the Sludge Slurper really is the game decider in the Shaman Mirror match. And he's got kind of an awkward situation where if he chooses to play first here, he won't be able to set up the Lickum and load up the weapon for future turns until maybe a little bit later on in the game.
What do you make of this Voltaic Burst on 1 from PNC as well? You see PNC right now head down deep in the deck list that he has in front of him. I do notice looking at our copies of the deck list that Lee plays a copy of Evil Totem that could have been coined out here. Is that what PNC has in mind here by just developing power onto the board?
Yeah, he's able to play around the Evil Totem a little bit. I'm a little surprised, but at the same time, PNC's hand hasn't shaped out too well here. Let's see if he actually is considering maybe evolving the 1/1s and going for early pressure, but I think a lot of the times that isn't enough to close out the game.
Right. PNC, if you haven't been following the Americas region, is one of the most notoriously considered players, let's phrase it, read slow. Has been caught roping on several occasions, missing a few attacks here and there. I think on this crucial stage, that's one area of his game that he is going to tidy up.
Yeah, I think for PNC, like going into the mirror match, not having the coin, you're already slightly unfavored. But being the first one to put minions out on the board, I think is a little questionable because there's not a lot of follow-up in the first few turns here.
Right.
You had held onto Voltaic Burst, perhaps this Thunderhead later on, or maybe even with Vicina just to clear a big minion from the opponent would have been nice.
Yeah, the Thunderhead I think was drawn after the Voltaic Burst was played, because it's always something that you can play to, but I was especially surprised with the Vicina in hand that he does have that swing potential with Vicina and Voltaic Burst.
I do think that PNC has forced Lee to react a little bit. Definitely wasn't expecting Lee to hit one of the 1/1s because you kind of want a few more minions out on the board when you have the Mogu.
Yeah, I'm very curious about that too. And this is just kind of the matchup in a nutshell, is every decision, just even down to the point of like, do I press my hero power or do I just float 2 mana and end the turn, can be game ending, right? Just in terms of how many minions are in play, because both decks play so many cards that punish the board state for having lots of individual minions on them.
this is a big flip already. What will the Frog get here? It's not the Evolve, so RNGLeaoh's options are a little bit limited here. He could have actually maybe had a game-ending turn here if he pulled the 1 mana cost Evolve off of the coin there.
Right. Spirit of the Frog, card draw engine for the deck. Every spell you cast, you draw a spell from your deck that costs 1 more than the one you played. So playing the coin counts as a 0 mana spell. You're able to draw a 1 mana spell from your deck, which in a lot of positions you would rather was evolved than anything else, which is why a lot of people have recently been cutting down on the amount of 1 mana spells in their deck, removing lightning bolts, for example, to increase the consistency of hitting those evolves.
Certainly now for Lee, he's going to go ahead and play the Voltaic Burst. I kind of wanted to see the Thunderhead come down. He's going to go with the Vicina instead. Also very powerful here, able to clear up PNC's board.
Again, how does he choose to make the trades here? Because again, it comes down to that point of just how many minions he wants left in play at the end of the turn, right?
Yeah, Lee choosing to keep his board size a little bit smaller, making sure that the opponent can't have a massive swing turn on the backside. And PNC's hand is not looking too great here. You definitely have to remove the Frog lest it draw more cards for Lee. But the Vicina is also a prime target here. You also got some pretty good hand reads that Lee doesn't have the Mutate in hand. Otherwise, I'm sure we would have seen the Mogu come out as an 8-drop at the end of this turn.
Yes, and also having seen the Voltaic Burst get played, you know that was the 1 mana spell that was drawn off the Frog, so you can kind of reduce the chances that Evolve is in your opponent's hand as well. As you mentioned, just kind of 3 prime targets on the board. PNC has to decide with. He is playing that double copy of Lightning Bolt that I referred to earlier that some players are choosing to cut away. But it's a very, very ugly looking turn here for PNC. And I think, honestly, a big part of that is just that his opponent has had Frog and he hasn't. I think that is a huge, huge disadvantage in the Shaman Mirror.
Yeah, and the rough part for PNC is that he's now kind of living off of a Desert Hare top deck to pair along with this Evolve.
Right.
Otherwise, it's difficult for even something like Spirit of the Frog to be good for him because he's also only able to cycle to the next Soul of the Murlocs, basically. Vicina coming out here for basically no value means he's given away some resources, trying to preserve a little bit of life and kind of biding his time until he finds the Desert Hare or the Mogu to pair with this Evolve. I think Lee smells a little bit of weakness here. These turns have not been pretty from PNC's side.
So how do you punish that weakness most effectively, in your opinion?
For Lee, he does have the Bloodlust in hand. He does have Stormbringer as well. He can kind of choose to go wide and assume that PNC doesn't have too much follow-up. But I think for Lee, he's going to play it cautiously for a little bit. Maybe just drop the Thunderhead alongside here, but he might even take it slower. It's not clear quite yet what the path to victory is for Lee.
Trying to look at like setting up Bloodlust Lethal for yourself on the following turn, but the danger of doing that, as you said, you explained it very, very nicely right at the top, which was if you go wide and you don't have the instant win to pay that off, right? If you're not just dropping Sea Giants alongside that, if you're not having a huge Evolve turn immediately, your opponent can just do the same thing back to you. And based on how dead PNC's hand has seemed to be from Lee's perspective, I think he is going to be somewhat afraid of, you know, this being a very Sea Giant, Mogu heavy hand potentially.
Yeah, I like RNG Lee's line here, just taking a little bit slow, getting Soul of the Murlocs down, ensuring that he has a board going into PNC's next few turns here.
See any path out of this from PNC? Because I'm struggling.
Certainly everything from Lee's board is a threat when Vicina is still online.
Right.
Unable to clear it for now means PNC kind of has to weather the storm and hope still for Desert Hare Evolve, potentially removing maybe just 1 minion and the Death Rattle effect with Voltaic Burst here. You could even set up your own Soul of the Forest to fight back a little bit, so maybe Totem, Voltaic Burst, Soul of the Forest. I mean, the fact is Lee already has gotten his minion reduction cards onto the board. So for PNC, he just wants to fight as much as he can, play around Bloodlust a little bit, and then go for his Evolve Swing turn a little bit later on.
So now here, Lee with the Bloodlust has, what, 12, 15 Yes, lethal, right? It's just 36.
PNC not able to clear off one minion here means RNGLeaoh does have lethal.
Yep.
On the swing back, and pretty decisive Shaman Mirror here. And a lot of Shaman Mirrors kind of pan out like this, where one player takes pretty firm control of the game and snowballs it from there.
Yeah, I think unless both players have very, very even hands, and the kind of situation happens that you were describing where one player has their big explosive evolve turn, the other player is then able to punish that with a Mogu evolve turn of their own or whatever. Like in that case, you kind of can have this big back and forth until someone lands a board that's not able to be dealt with. And I think in that scenario, Lee just had access to his Spirit of the Frog early on, which I think was just a potentially huge engine for him. And it was just a very, pressure-based game plan for him. We didn't really see any of those huge, disgusting evolve turns that the decks are known for up to that point.
Yeah, pretty quick and easy game for Lee there. Not a lot of fight back from PNC's hand. And, the Shaman deck can kind of sputter out there. You get a little inconsistent with the hand sometimes when you are running things like double Lightning Bolt, double Soul of the Murlocs, double Bloodlust.
We talked a lot during Grandmasters about how we saw a lot of Priest mirrors back then. We're expecting to see a lot of Shaman mirrors in this tournament. And a lot of players, at least in Europe, would open with the Priest mirrors. We're seeing the Shaman mirror get opened with here. And we kind of played up this kind of sarcastic silver lining of like, well, if you lose the opener, at least you still get to play Priest. Or in this case, at least you still get to play Shaman. So looking at the rest of the series now, the decks they have available, assuming the Shaman does pick up a win on the other side for PNC, how do you see it breaking down between the other decks?
Well, certainly, you're right. PNC Shaman should be able to find a win, and I expect him to stay on the Shaman for game 2. Going past that, with the Paladin being banned, PNC really just has the Combo Priest and the Druid afterwards, which means Lee's able to open up with Rogue, but it kind of comes into a coin toss situation where Lee's Rogue is good against PNC's Priest, but it's pretty bad against the Druid. So the queue order and exactly which of the decks you want to play out of your best of 3 here is going to be a big decision point. I expect Lee to play it safe and probably play the Paladin. In that case, it'll be Paladin potentially versus the Priest or the Druid, which has pretty decent matchups against both.
How much does not having to play your full lineup in a series change the way that you construct things? Does that one deck that you can kind of hide really have an impact on deck lineup building?
Certainly. In best of 3s, you can kind of scare people off of a queue because you threaten to play, let's say, Lee's or PNC's Druid might threaten Lee to stay off of the Rogue in a best of 3. But going into the later stage after groups, best of 5s, a lot of that deck construction can come back to punish you in case your opponent has a lineup that can hard target the Warrior or the Druid and things like that.
Well, certainly Lee does have a big advantage going into this one. He is 1-0 up. We have plenty more Hearthstone action for you guys. Don't go anywhere. Right back with the Global Finals after this break.
BlizzCon 2019 is brought to you by Coca-Cola, the official refreshment of BlizzCon. Facebook Gaming, a world of play. Samsung SSD, performance gamers trust. Corsair, do your thing. And by NVIDIA.
随着黄金公开赛佛山站的结束，我们也在佛山迎来了第2位代表国服出战特级大师赛全球总决赛的选手RNGLeaoh。他将和 RNGLeaoh 一同代表国服前往暴雪嘉年华。我们也在此为大家回顾一下RNGLeaoh的一路竞技历程。随着新版本奥丹姆骑兵的到来，对于新版本的理解就成了众多选手能否取得成绩的重要因素。RNGLeaoh作为一名征战职业赛场多年的老将，同时也是一位科技怪咖，在新版本1时就开始研究元气骑卡组。在新版本全球首秀的黄金公开赛大师组上海站的比赛中，RNGLeaoh凭借一手元气骑一路过关斩将，击败莫论人飞以及 WE 听皇2位老牌选手，挺进决赛。在决赛中，则是遭遇到 Vicky Swipe 动物园的挑战。RNGLeaoh在先输一局的情况下，顶住了对手的进攻，成功的让1追2，拿到了新版本的首个冠军，并成功晋级大师组第2赛季季后赛。不久之后，天津、上海、成都黄金公开赛上表现最为出色的8位炉石选手齐聚佛山，为了一个特级大师赛全球总决赛的名额展开争夺。 而 RNGLeaoh 则在半决赛上迎来了来自 IG 随缘风的挑战，面对战队赛的 MVP 韦风哥，RNGLeaoh展现出了平时辛勤练习的成果，尤其是在一局任务德对阵防战的赛点局中，利用伊利斯打出无限手牌的操作惊艳全场。在最终的决赛上，RNGLeaoh再次迎来了老对手，莫论人非。双方前几局互有胜负，比赛被拖入了决胜局。在这场惊心动魄的元气旗内战中，前期RNGLeaoh在过牌上略逊于莫论人非，但在关键时刻，RNGLeaoh依靠赛卡尔和回血将自己的血量提升到了50点，在汤水商贩的配合下追上了过牌数量，并且成功的爆掉了对手一张神圣愤怒，最终成功翻盘，夺得了黄金公开赛大师组第2赛季季后赛的冠军，拿到了国服第2张直通安纳海姆的入场券。1个月后，RNGLeaoh就将和 RNGLeaoh 踏上前往暴雪嘉年华特级大师赛全球总决赛的征程。我们期待这2位选手可以继续他们出色的发挥，成功的将奖杯带回中国。
Welcome back, everybody, to the Hearthstone Grandmasters Global Finals here at BlizzCon. We are in our first series of the day, and Lee, representing China, has taken a 1-0 lead in the series over PNC from the Americas region. Now, Sam, I want to ask you, of course, you played in the Americas Grandmasters alongside PNC this season. Is there anything from your encounters with him that has stuck out to you about PNC as a player?
We have been in different groups, but he does tend to favor combo-style decks. I don't find it to be that big of a surprise that PNC is the only player in the top 8 to have brought the Holy Wrath Paladin. Along with that, he's also bringing slower decks such as the Baleful Banker Druid. So he definitely favors combo and control-y style decks more so than the aggressive lineup such as RNGLeaoh has brought.
Yes.
And going to game 2, I believe we got word that it's going to be PNC on the Druid and Lee on the Rogue. So this is probably the best pan out for PNC in this case, where he actually managed to land a flip here where Lee was willing enough to go with Rogue, expecting that PNC might stay on the Shaman, and PNC gets the punish with the Druid Q here, giving PNC about a 60-40 matchup in this set. And I dare say from this point on, even though PNC is down 0-1, he might end up a favorite in my book here.
Wow. I do want to ask you about that, actually, because players talk about this a lot. You know, you just phrased it there as he won a flip in terms of the Q order. But a lot of players I've heard say during post-match interviews, they say, like, I outpicked my opponent. I won the mind games, right? Like, is that something you can actually get good at in this format, or is it just a coin flip situation?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't want to put it too lightly there, but definitely there is a lot of skill in the way that you want to win the mind games in these situations and do your pick bans when it comes to best of 3, because there is going to be a deck left out. And when the format first rolled around in Grandmasters, I felt like I definitely had an edge in Shield Phase Conquest through that, but players are getting a lot smarter at these pick ban stages. A lot of times people go for a more safe pick, and you don't get to get such a dream matchup like Druid versus the Rogue.
And that's so weird for me to hear, the dream matchup of Druid versus the Rogue, because throughout Hearthstone's history, these matchups of, you know, mid-rangey Druids versus Rogues have been enormously Rogue favored. It was like the reason you brought out Rogue, right, was to punish the Druids. What is it about this specific iteration of Rogue versus Druid that has flipped it in favor of the Druid?
Certainly. So Rogue's power level is kind of based on its ability to control the board and the tempo tools such as Vendetta for 0 mana that it's able to pull out. But Druid doesn't really do anything the first few turns, and Rogue doesn't really mount that much pressure. So for Druid, they've got things like Oasis Surger, being able to play 2 5/5s when the quest is done. But the matchup also flips very much percentage-wise based on who has the coin. And in this game, RNGLeaoh has been blessed a little bit here with the coin and the Edwin in hand.
Yeah, he kept the Edwin. He threw away a questing adventurer, which I guess surprised me a little bit. I can definitely understand the logic of only keeping like one of those two payoff cards, but I think questing adventurer, because of the lack of options that druids have early to remove it, is like a pretty powerful snowball card in the matchup. Are you agreeing with throwing that away here?
Yeah, certainly both Edwin and Questing Adventure are very resource demanding, so you tend to just go with one of them, and all in on the Edwin seems to make a lot more sense when you've got the coin.
Okay.
And PNC here debating a little bit whether or not he should get out this Crystal Merchant with the Innervate to start drawing cards from his deck. The hand looks all right for the first few turns. You do have Wrath to react to a 3/3, so I definitely like getting the Merchant out first and starting the draw engine for the Druid.
Yeah, pretty dream start for the Druid here. Druid Quest, you have to finish turns with unspent mana. If you are not familiar with the Druid Quest up until this point, 4 turns you have to complete by having at least 1 mana crystal unused at the end of the turn, but you can use the card Innovate to kind of cheat that in certain situations, as you saw there. So he spent 2 mana and then just innovated to functionally float mana at the end of the turn, meaning this is about as good as the turn, good as a start gets for Druid going first here. Obviously, as Saiyan mentioned, you do like to have the coin as Quest Druid in these scenarios, because that does give you that 1 free turn as well. When you play the quest on turn 1, that you can just throw away the coin to complete a quest tick.
Yeah, and Lee deep in thought here. Unfortunately, the hand doesn't pan out too well for Edwin. He might even just land it here as a 4/4. Yeah, I definitely like this from Lee. He recognizes that, you know, I kept this Edwin, but I got a little unlucky. I don't have the ways to make it a big, impactful 6/6 or 8/8 yet. But I can definitely just play it out to contest the board, because I do have a curve to follow it. The Blink Fox from there, and the Waggle Pick equip afterwards. I do have to say, though, it's kind of mediocre pressure, the kind of pressure that Druid is rather good at stabilizing against.
I imagine Lee's probably going to have to respect this Crystal Merchant next turn anyway, as opposed to just like pressuring face damage, depending on what PNC chooses to do with it here.
I can see how the draw engine is a little bit scary, but for Lee, he also needs to get the clock going. If I'm in this position, my hand is rather mediocre. The best way for me to win is to kind of just hope for the damage on board getting there. So I probably would ignore the Merchant from Lee's side going for the next few turns.
Okay. PNC just dropping the hero power here. You can see yet again he is head down, buried in those deck lists that he has in front of them. Of course, open deck list tournament here. The full lists of every player is available to their opponents. So you can see PNC just studying all the options that this rogue deck has to punish him before deciding on his action.
Yeah, and for Lee here, the curve playing out very nicely. Blink Fox on the follow-up. Worthy Expedition. Lee actually going for the trade, giving Druid a little bit more time here. It seems like this Edwin won't be pushing any damage thus far.
Right. Seems like a pretty clean Wrath option for PNC on this turn if he does want to reduce the damage on board.
Yeah, this is kind of where Druid starts thriving. You know, it's turn 4. The quest is just 1 or 2 turns away from completion, and PNC still at basically 30 life.
Right. As you mentioned, Lee's hand not really going anywhere here. If he does pick up Myra's, he has had that dead card Nomi sat in his hand the entire time. Chef Nomi, not a card that is always played in these aggressive rogue lists, but it does give you that kind of 1-2 punch of emptying your deck with Myra's Unstable Element and then jamming down the Chef Nomi. And I imagine in what you're calling a pretty bad matchup here for the rogue, that is one way that you can potentially just scam out a victory against Druid.
I mean, certainly this is the primary reason why Lee has brought Chef Nomi and Myra's. It's specifically for the Druid matchup. In any other scenario, I believe the rogues pretty much favored without these late game tools. But here, Lee has opted to bring Nomi and Myra's, and he did get the Q into Druid, so if he does find Myra's, this could be very game changing.
Does this turn as simple as Waggle Pick? Or does the potential development option off a Pharaoh Cat here maybe get another minion to go alongside it?
And for Lee, there simply just isn't enough pressure.
Right.
Even if you put on the Waggle pick, the Blink Fox Waggle pick is never going to push enough through the Druid's defenses. He needs to find something more, and certainly where the Expedition is a start.
You agree with this sequencing? Because you take away, what's the card? Candle Taker as an option to be able to just play out here immediately alongside the Pharaoh Cat. I think Worthy Expedition is right to go first there over the Pharaoh Cat.
Choose soon.
I think Pharaoh Cat opening that box first was probably correct.
Okay.
You're definitely right in alluding to Candle Taker. That's one of the more sticky minions that you can get from the Pharaoh Cat, and Druid has a hard time dealing with Reborn minions as well.
Right. So now you can see the difference between Druid on the play versus Druid on coin. A Druid on coin will have had this quest completed by now, and it would be Oasis Surges coming out this turn, a big Nourish turn on the follow-up, and Lee would really just be out of hope at that point. But this one extra turn that he has here to maybe consolidate some board presence, maybe push some damage, it could possibly be the difference here in the matchup.
Yeah, and for PNC, the Innervate draw was just one turn too late. Otherwise, he would have been able to play the Surger out this turn as well.
Right.
But Swipe is not too bad. I mean, as long as you're clearing board, preserving life total, it seems like PNC is going to handily make it to the quest, and Rogue won't have too much on board when he gets there.
Yeah, Lee still looking like he's a long way off putting anything together.
Yeah, for Lee, the 4-drop isn't too bad, though. A Reborn minion means most likely you're going to at least see that 4 damage connect to face. He doesn't know that PNC has the Crystal Power alongside Oasis Surger, able to deal with basically the 2 big threats on the board here,
right,
and then go from there to play out the Nourish. And I kind of do like saving Nourish a little bit more. When you play Nourish on 7, you have the ability to follow that up with Ferocious Howl. So not only are you drawing cards, but you're also able to gain a little more life there as well. So I like dealing with the board first and then going for the draw a little bit later.
Certainly the decision that PNC has to make right now is something that we've seen a lot of disagreement over throughout Grandmasters. Although, you know, context can change situations, but we've seen a lot of players just jamming Nourish and accepting a little bit of damage just to have that card cast and invested. We've seen a lot of other players do what Saiyan is describing, spend one turn reacting to the board, and then play for that Nourish and Ferocious Howl curve. Because you also, if you wait one more turn to play the Nourish, you also give yourself one more draw to find, for example, a Nubasath Defender to be able to come down in the same turn for it, which PNC does not currently have available.
Yeah, certainly the Druid Nourish turn should come a little bit later because there's nothing to really support it in the hand yet.
Right.
And just increasing those odds are very nice. PNC going to go ahead and fight for the board first. And take away the board from Rogue, especially with this life total, and you're in a pretty good spot ready.
Your presence.
Crucially, Worthy Expedition does not revive the dead minion, dealing the damage and then healing it afterwards.
So for Lee here, he's able to go for Vendetta, and suddenly the Tending Torrent kind of like fills out the curve for Lee here. He's able to go for 2 2/2s, I believe, with the 3/4 body as well. So not too bad in terms of contesting the board, but I think Lee will be a little bit disappointed to see that PNC has the Nourish follow-up as well.
Do you ever go Dagger Hench Clan instead, just to be able to clear the board from his opponent's side?
Well, the Tending Torrent puts out 7 power, and I'm definitely liking the most amount of tempo that I can get for the mana cost at the moment.
So many.
The Hench Clan will be able to support your further turns, but just putting out a 4/3 I feel like is not quite enough when you're not exactly pressuring the Druid at the moment.
So you want to Vendetta make the trade of the 1/1 into the 5/1 and then just drop Tending Torrent?
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a pretty good sacrifice. The Pharaoh Cat will have to go, but you do get a pretty hefty board on the upside here.
Okay.
There's that Anubis off the center, making this a pretty good Nourish turn for PNC.
There's the Howl as well that you were talking about. PNC gets fully rewarded for his decision to hold on for 1 turn. But I think that's also a big reason why, you know, your play here of just playing the Tending Torrent, Lee's play as well, is so important. Because just because a Druid did not Nourish on 6 does not mean that they don't want to nourish on the following turn, right? Like we were talking about that dynamic where, you know, you can't just eliminate nourish from the hand because they didn't play it on 6. So continuing to load up pressure so that you can punish your Druid opponent for playing nourish as effectively as possible, I think is very important.
Jewels of the sound.
Yeah, and PNC here playing in this order, likely going to throw out the Floop as well, going full tempo in this case. The Floop is a card that will allow the Druid to kind of go infinite with the Baleful Banker and the Elise combo, but in tempo matchups like this, once Druid starts getting ahead on board and throwing down the scenarios, it's very often enough to just kind of end the game against Rogue.
Right. Yeah, and I think specifically with that Scenarius in hand, I think that's why PNC is potentially just so interested here in having a board state. It's not like he needs to desperately be defensive against this board that Lee has with the health total that he has available with a Ferocious Howl in hand. But I think just PNC just sees some blood here himself in terms of, hey, if I make a board state here and my opponent can't just clear everything, my Scenarius becomes incredibly good on the following turn.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Lee is on the back foot here. I think he's going to have to find some defensive plays here, maybe Waggle, Pick, Eviscerate, clear off the board. And then what he's really banking on is finding Myra's sooner than later.
Right.
Because at that point, I think Chef Nomi is one of the only cards remaining that could really push enough damage against PNC, given PNC has drawn with Crystal Merchants, he has drawn with Nourish. He's likely holding Oasis, Hidden Oasis in the hand, or maybe Ferocious Howl, just some extra life gain. And on top of that, he's getting to 10 mana, so Kuhn the Forgotten King can come out and really solidify the game for Druid.
I think there's a window, right, where the Nomi will lose its effectiveness if you play at a stage of the game where PNC Zephyrus has potentially become active, because then the clear is available for Druid. And the reason we talk about that combo of Myra's and Nomi being so powerful against Druid is that their deck just naturally doesn't really play a way to deal with that board state. And they can do certain things with a double AoE and spell damage in play, but that's a multi-turn setup. The one thing they can do is just play Zephyrus and Brawl you, or Zephyrus and Twisting Nether you. So the quicker you can do it, the less likely that Zephyrus is to be active from PNC.
Yeah, and also on Lee's side, he does have Shadow Steps in the deck, so potentially multiple waves of Nomi would be enough to close out this game as well. So from RNGLeaoh's side, not a great hand. These saps are looking pretty dead. At least Waggle, Pick, and Eviscerate can kind of clear up the board a little bit, but certainly you don't want to be sapping Scenarius, as that card coming back to bite you will not make the board stay any easier on the turns to come.
Yeah, and you can start to see why this matchup does just get a bit miserable for the Rogue. I don't know if we can even call it Hearthstone if Rogue isn't favored against Druid. Like I don't know what game I'm playing right now. This is not how it's supposed to work.
Certainly things have been turned upside down a little bit with the new Druid quest.
It's just the resiliency, I think. Like Rogue will get off to an aggressive start, it'll push some damage, as you saw here. You know, it wasn't the most aggressive of starts that the Rogue can have, but Lee kind of played out his role as the aggressor, but it just hits a brick wall so quickly in this matchup, it seems like.
I mean, in this matchup, the Edwin keep such high hopes for that card, right? You're looking good, you've got Edwin on the coin,
right?
But the Druid just doesn't do a lot of stuff going to the next few turns, right?
Right.
So the fact that you can't really combo much with Edwin, let's say a Backstab or a Vendetta, PNC did happen to have the Crystal Merchant on board in the early game, but unfortunately for Lee, there was just no real way for him to juice up the Edwin there.
Yeah, it's kind of why I was curious about the Questing Adventurer, because at least the way I look at it, like, both of those cards are going to require you to dodge certain things from the opponent to have them stick. But for me, like with the Questing Adventurer, if you do dodge it, like it doesn't just continue hitting your opponent for 6 every turn. It hits your opponent for 6, then it hits your opponent for 9, then it hits your opponent for 12. You know, like it ends the game so much faster if you're able to stick a Questing in that scenario. I think with the hands that we saw, I don't think either of those keeps was going to really get him very far. But it was interesting to me that the Edwin was the keep and the Questing Adventurer was thrown away.
Yeah, and pretty standard turn for PNC here. Starting off the turn with the Ferocious Howl, making sure that he's outside of the Waggle, Pick, and Leroy range at 16. Basically, at this point, playing around damage is all PNC needs to worry about because he's got a very handy state on the board.
Right.
And no Myers yet, meaning this is about the last turn that it would have been good, potentially enough for Lee to pull out the win here. He
said last turn that it's going to be good. 7 mana, 6/6. does not quite fit my definition of the words, but I think Lee is right here, and that the Nomi dream is just about over. He just has to play it.
It's kind of an interesting play because he gets to pull it back, right?
Yep.
So now the Chef Nomi costs 5 mana, and in the case that he top decks Myra the next turn, he actually is able to go for Myra's and then 5 mana Chef Nomi. So I think RNGLeaoh here is spotting a very, very cheeky line here that could potentially put him back into the game.
Yeah, I think it's a extremely small out. That was going to be the question I asked you, because of course I think one of the skills of being an absolute top tier player is that you do cling to those 1% outs or even sub 1% outs. Like, you find them, right? And if it's a 1% out over 100 games, you're going to hit it once, right? And you play a lot more than 100 games of Hearthstone over the course of being a professional Hearthstone player. But I think in this scenario, PNC's already pushing 9 this turn, which means Lee's at 12. If he then spends 10 mana on the following turn just playing Myra's and Nomi, I think it's incredibly unlikely that PNC is not able to just outright kill him through that play. But I still respect, you know, playing to his outs, just finding some kind of dream scenario where he's able to win this game.
I mean, anything long of just playing the Treant again is going to give PNC lethal.
Yes.
So it seems like PNC able to lock up this game as long as he plays for tempo a little bit more. There shouldn't be very many outs left for Lee, especially because he has to spend 5 mana already to play the Myras.
Yeah, looks like tempo to me. Just drops out his Zephyrus as a Bloodfen Raptor. Biggest minions all face this turn from PNC. Leroy, the wrong 5 mana card for Lee, although as we can see from PNC, he set up a position where he beats the Myras out anyway. And I think Lee is turning his outs face up in that scenario anyway, right? Like, PNC understands what that play is about from Lee on that previous turn. So I think it's quite a simple response on his part to just say, okay, I just have to load up as much damage as I possibly can on this turn.
Yeah, definitely well navigated from PNC. And for Lee, you know, Rogue on coin, I would say the matchup is closer to 50-50, but not quite the pan out, not quite the draws that he needed to win that series here, or to win that game here. Going back to the series, now they're tied up 1-1.
Yeah, 1-1 now, with the Shaman having picked up a win for Lee, and the Druid, as you just saw, picking up the win for PNC. And I think this goes back to a point you made earlier, which is now that PNC hit that matchup, even though he was coming from the unfavorable position of being 1-0 down, he was perhaps overall favored in the series because of the matchups that he still had available.
Right, definitely easier to get a win with the Shaman than with one of the other decks that aren't Shaman in this case. So the fact that PNC has Shaman left, potentially up against the Paladin or the Rogue, which are both favorable matchups for the Shaman, I think PNC is a favorite from this spot on, definitely.
Well, we will see if he can fulfill his role as favorite in the opinions of Sam. We will be right back after this extremely quick word from our sponsors.
BlizzCon 2019 is brought to you by T-Mobile. Their newest signal goes farther than ever, and it's built 5G ready. MSI True Gaming. Intel, the official CPU partner of BlizzCon. And by HyperX. We're all gamers.
Told you we'd be quick. We are right back, and we have a game number 3 coming up for you. So now, you mentioned, we were just talking about, right before that word from our sponsors, favored position, we would say, for PNC. If you had to play a deck against Shaman here, like, what are you picking?
Well, Lee has the options of Paladin and Rogue, and I think the Rogue has been specifically teched to sometimes pull ahead against Shaman. You basically have 3 Edwins in your deck, right?
Sure.
1 Edwin, 2 questing adventurers. So if you're able to stick the early questing, make it a 4/4, sometimes the Shaman doesn't have the range to kill it off immediately, and then that can really snowball for a win for the Rogue. So I would expect RNGLeaoh to be on Rogue again, especially because he picked it in the previous game as well. He definitely feels like it has an edge versus Shaman, and because there's that Nomi and the Myers aspect, he felt okay queuing it into the Druid, because he kind of, at some point, he at least had some out in the matchup, right? It wasn't completely lost there.
Do you think the questing build of Rogue is the most effective against Shaman, as opposed to like the Shark build or anything else that other people are playing?
Yeah, I'm very conflicted on this saddle,
okay,
because there have been 4 Rogue decks brought. 3 of them are playing the questing adventurer Edwin list, and Fino, a player who I practiced with a little bit and helped him get ready for BlizzCon. I think our camp is all for the Shark in this case. We think Shark is an absolutely terrific card in Rogue and allows the Rogue to go for a lot of those later game scenarios, which can be very good against Shaman too. But for the questing Rogue, it needs to pull ahead against the Shaman's early board state and have the questing snowball. So it's a little less consistent because you're all in the beginning stages. And if you get there, you get there. But I think Shark allows you to pull back a lot better in some of the late game scenarios after surviving the first few waves from Shaman.
Yeah, sorry, just to be clear, you're saying late game scenarios against Shaman. Those, in my experience, those don't exist.
Oftentimes, the game can kind of boil down to that massive swing turn for Shaman, and I mean, nobody really blames you for losing to those incredible Shaman burst turns, but if the Shaman doesn't have every single piece it needs, oftentimes Rogue is able to deal with a big minion with the sap, it's able to Vendetta another threat, and then maybe even throw down like Waggle Pick or the existing board to clear out the first wave from Shaman, and then from that point on, Shark can be a very decisive tool in the matchup.
So from the Shaman side in the matchup, is there anything different from like just conventional Shaman gameplay that you have to look out for against Rogue?
Keep Thunderhead. Thunderhead as a 3/6 is incredibly difficult for Rogue to deal with, and a lot of the times the Shaman is able to play reactive in this matchup, and if the Rogue pushes these 3 health minions into the Shaman's swing turns, it's very easy for the Shaman to pull ahead and then answer the 3 health minions with things like Lightning Bolt, Zap. The extra 1/1s generated by Thunderhead are great at doing that kind of stuff.
Going first as well, or just on the coin for Thunderhead Keep?
We're getting very specific here, and
I mean, when we have a player of your caliber here saying we're going to get very specific, because I want to learn as well.
Now, is this a trick question, Subtle? Because I think the Thunderhead is just a must-keep in the Rogue matchup, but I have seen some people opt to not play it, given that they're going first and the Rogue has the coin.
Okay.
Instead, they're looking for things like Lickum and Lightning Bolt, and that too can deal with 2/3 health minions. So kind of depends on how much faith you have in the Thunderhead, and that's the case, but it's a little up in the air. I'd say most players choose not to keep it going first.
You see some support in the crowd for PNC, of course, as Frodan mentioned in his introduction. He is bringing the entire spirit of Latin America with him into this as the first Latin American representative to make it to a global stage. And I think Lee as well has no shortage of that behind him as well, because although China does generally make it to these positions, and China are the current Hearthstone Global Games champions, when it's come to these single-player championship events at the ends of years and the ends of seasons, I think China has generally underperformed.
Yeah, I think Lee has been kind of compared to the Chinese version of Muzzy in this case,
right,
where he's had very consistent ladder finishes, and he's also had a lot of great tournament experience as well. Like you mentioned, he was captain of the HGG team. He's brought, in that format, it was, I believe, 9 decks, so he brought some pretty wacky tech cards for their Warrior and for their Quest Mage, I believe. So
yes,
winning kind of with his own creation, and here at BlizzCon, bringing out some of the more interesting techs, I would say, from Rogue, as well as his Highlander Paladin deck.
Yeah, and having cast that HGG finals, which China were involved in, and seeing that Quest Mage firsthand, like even for Quest Mage, which was an unusual deck back then, it was a ridiculous build of Quest Mage on top of that as well. And honestly, no one had seen this deck before. I was like scouring for opinions wherever possible. And the only people that really knew anything about it was the Chinese team, and they weren't really too interested in sharing their strategy on the deck with the world. So we just kind of had to figure out things as we went along with that deck. And I think Lee, quite rightly, has a lot of credit as an innovative deck builder based on some of those decks that I have seen him put together.
Yeah, this is a pretty bad sign. When the Rogue decides to swing with the dagger on turn 2, it often means that they're planning on swinging again and re-daggering. So you already know from the front there that Lee basically is telegraphing 0 3-mana plays.
He's not only broadcasting 0 3-mana plays, he's broadcasting 3 0-mana plays, which is perhaps even worse in this scenario. That hand is miserable looking. I only see one current plan to victory here from Lee's point of view. He has a Leroy, he has a Shadow Step, and he has a Waggle Pick in his hand.
He does have those combinations for burst damage, and these 0-mana spells, they're looking pretty bad at this point, but they are kind of fuel just for the Edwin or for the questing adventure if he's able to pick up one of those as well.
There's only one plan, right, Saiyan? This has got to be it. Picked up the Eviscerate as well.
Yeah, place to be has to be face here for Lee. And, you know, there's a reason why Myra is in the deck as well. He's able to kind of front load this damage first, and if you top decks Myra later on, you know, potentially the next Waggle pick or the next Eviscerate is able to close out the game purely from damage from Lee's side.
Right.
Luckily for Lee, there's not something like Hair Evolve on the follow-up here from PNC. PNC is looking to pick up the take burst to potentially go for Evolve this turn, and this could be huge right here. PNC gonna go ahead and make the minions happen here. We'll take first. Like to see the Evolve follow-up. It's not quite as good. It's kind of like DIY for Desert Hair Evolve, but it's still 2/4 drops and 2/2 drops.
Right.
No board to laugh at here.
Yeah, I think that's one of the more like underappreciated elements of Spirit of the Frog, in that it also gives you a 4-drop at the end of the turn when you drop the Evolve after being your card draw engine. PNC is going to rip out the Zap here on his own Frog, which makes sense, drawing 2 more cards. Now the Evolve comes down. That is a very effective racing board, especially with this weapon equipped. That means with the weapon equipped for PNC, every minion that he's able to hit with that weapon is going to generate him an extra 3-drop off that Disease Vulture that he rolled.
Yeah, and for RNGLeaoh, he's going to go all damage route. This questing comes in hand, which is good with all of these 0-mana spells, but I think Lee has already set his mind to Leroy Shadow Step. Leroy.
Yep.
Which for 6 mana is going to be able to close out this game if PNC does not find a taunt to put in the way of it.
Saying, I think this might just come down to everyone's favorite card, Evolve, because there are all sorts of outcomes here with Lifesteal Rush, with Taunt, various end-of-turn effects that can restore health as well that could potentially mess with this, because we can see, even with Prep Eviscerate, that just Taunt Totem on its own is not good enough here to prevent this damage coming through.
Yeah, and for PNC, unfortunately, none of the 4-drops ended up being a taunt. I believe the 4-mana cost slot to evolve into is the highest percentage of getting a taunt. What he'll have to rely on is maybe the 2-drops, picking up something like the 2/6. The injured Tol'Vir being completely uninjured and in the way is quite a hindrance for RNGLeaoh. Outside of that, 5-drops are kind of lacking in taunts, I believe.
No, they are actually almost as likely, if not slightly more so, to find Taunt than 4-drops. 13% of 5-drops do have Taunt currently.
Stand corrected.
Yeah.
You got the numbers with you, Sal.
I do. Don't expose me. That's all in my head. That's all in my head. At no point did I refer to notes, okay? That's the line. That's what we've got to carry.
PNC not finding the taunt that he needs in the way. He has built a very impressive board before turn 5, but the Rogue getting the kill right here on turn 6.
Yeah, huge outcome for Lee. He had a terrible looking hand, but it started to look slightly more appealing when you just jam it all into your opponent's face. PNC needed to go fishing for those evolve outcomes. Needed end of turn effects to heal him, needed big taunts that didn't die to that Prep Eviscerate. Did not find any of the outs he needed, and it's Lee, our Chinese representative, who's going to go out 1-0 in his group, going to make his way into that winners match later on today. But do not worry, PNC fans. Do not worry, South American Hearthstone supporters. PNC is still very much in this tournament. He is just going to have to play from the lower side of that Division A bracket.
Yeah, and I was saying going into this match that likely PNC was a favorite here. The matchup should be pretty Shaman favored, but you know, Lee just found the line and went directly face, and it added up to 30, right, in the end. Right by turn 6, right before the Shaman was able to Bloodlust and build a big enough board to represent lethal on the other side. I mean, a crazy game. I mean, props to Lee for sticking with the game plan. I know the Questing Adventurer draw eventually kind of looked a little tempting to try and build that up, but certainly Lee was already committed. He got the math down at that point. Exactly 30, well played. Turn 6 Rogue is back.
Turn 6 Rogue indeed. Sometimes counting to 30 is about all you need to do, but now with the Shaman not picking up a win for PNC, you have to go back to the Shaman Mirror as the most important matchup of the series, right? So do you think there was anything that can be looked back on in that Shaman Mirror that could have changed the series?
I think the Shaman Mirror was just fairly brutal for PNC. Not a lot to do. The hand is, I mean, we saw Lee's hand, and then we saw PNC left with the combo pieces and none of the ways to activate it. So pretty cut and dry mirror there. And overall, props for Lee for making it out into the winner's side there. Very well done on the rogue play there.
Yep, for sure. Lee is going to advance into the winner side of the group. PNC will continue to fight it out in the lower side. If you enjoyed one Grandmaster casting, we've got a special treat for you because we're going to have the double Grandmasters cast coming up for you right after this break with Hunter Ace and Gallop.
BlizzCon 2019 is brought to you by Coca-Cola, the official refreshment of BlizzCon. Facebook Gaming, a world of play. Samsung SSD, performance gamers trust. Corsair, do your thing. And by NVIDIA,